Hey everybody, what's up? So last week there was this small thing you may have heard of. If not, it's okay because it probably wasn't that big. It's called Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it's something that they've been building up towards for a long time since. Technically, I would say even the Flash season one, if you want to say, but more recently it's been in Arrow season 8 and the Flash season 6, where they've really been building up to this major crossover, Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is also a very major moment in comics history. And this week, I am going to be doing a combined review, a spoiler review for parts 1 through 3. For the last few months, I've been doing individual episode recaps for both The Flash and Arrow, which have been really building up to this crossover. But I am going to focus more on the major events of this crossover. If you haven't watched the crossover by now, you can still go to cwtv.com and go watch it. It's actually in its own little section, which is kind of convenient. I actually wish they did that when they put it on Netflix and stuff. But anyway, if you haven't watched it, go watch it there and then come back here because I'm talking full spoilers. Again, I'm not talking about every detail of everything that happened in this crossover, but I am going to talk about the things that stood out to me, big surprises, and general thoughts. And I am going to mention a little bit about Black Lightning season 4 because their episode kind of ties into it. So also spoilers for Black Lightning. But it won't be that big of a thing because it's only a small part of it. All right, let's get into it. So part 1, I thought was off to a great start. We have first a few crazy cameos. We have Robin from the Batman 66, like the Adam West Batman. His Earth is gone. You see Batman 89 gone, and that Earth's gone, and that's Michael Keaton's Batman. Their Earth's gone. The Titans are gone, like the Titans from the DC Universe streaming service. So what I thought was really great about this first scene after the Monitor's explanation of the multiverse is that they're really establishing that any previous DC TV property, even some of the movies, are part of the Arrowverse multiverse. And now that's really, really amazing that they're all tied together because that opens the door for them to actually meet each other, right? The Titans may one day show up on Flash, probably not Arrow because it's ending, but maybe one day they could show up on Flash, crossover. And same thing with Black Lightning. Like even in the beginning when they said it wasn't going to be really a part of the Arrowverse, I didn't believe that because they had already established a multiverse. So really anybody could be a part of this thing. It doesn't matter. They could just say, in the beginning they could say that it's not a part of it, but then later on they could totally retcon and say, yes, they were a part of a different Earth the whole time. And that has been working a lot. Like they've had to do that with Supergirl first, where she was on CBS. She was on a different network altogether. And then when they brought her over to CW, they just said, oh yeah, she was just always there. She was just part of a different Earth. So that's what was really exciting towards the beginning of this. Now we have the scene of Harbinger, Lila Michaels, going around assembling the heroes for the crisis. And it starts out with Supergirl's Earth. We see everybody freaking out. Apparently the pets in National City are freaking out because they can sense the crisis. And the DEO is picking up stuff in their scanners, whatever. Brainy is tracking what's happening. And it turns out there's an antimatter wave heading for them. The first piece, or the first planet in the way of this antimatter wave is Argo City, which is the remnants of Krypton. And so they try to escape, like they try to get as many people out, but of course they couldn't all get out in time. And Lois and Clark, who are living there now, have to send off their baby in a pod, which is like a callback to Superman's origin story. And I think it's also something else that happened in the comics that was similar, but that was an interesting callback. And we also see Lila going around collecting the other heroes like Flash. And we can see Barry is ready to go. He's like, yep, this is the time. Like he just accepts his fate here because he knows this is the time where he might have to sacrifice himself. And then there's Batwoman, who has no idea about the multiverse, is just minding her own business. I mean, she knows about Flash and Arrow, but right now she's worried about catching Alice and the Wonderland gang. So when Lila comes along to take her, she's not happy about it. And at first that was funny, but I feel like Batwoman was kind of, I don't know if she necessarily fit into this at the beginning, especially because I'm not really sure where in the timeline her show is happening in relation to the previous seasons of the Arrowverse, especially with the Elseworlds crossover, because in Elseworlds, it seemed like she had already been Batwoman for a while. Like she was already established. And her base actually looked kind of different. Like there was vines and stuff growing in the Wayne Tower or whatever. So it looked like no one had been there for a while, like it was abandoned. But then when you start this crossover, this is picking up right where her season left off, and then in her season, it started with her not even having the suit and stuff yet. Like you see her become Batwoman, and you see her dealing with Alice and all that stuff. So what I'm confused about is, where did Elseworlds happen? That's my big question, is where did Elseworlds happen in this timeline, in Batwoman's timeline? I'm not too sure about that, and they haven't really explained it. So maybe they're just kind of ignoring that? I don't know. Maybe if you know where Batwoman's supposed to fit in the timeline, let me know in the comments, because I was kind of confused about that. But anywho, we have the heroes assembling together, and they have this mission now to protect these quantum towers, which are the only thing standing between them, the Earths, and the antimatter and the anti-monitor. Like these towers are protecting them from the antimatter, and they have to guard these towers from whatever forces the anti-monitor sends to take them down. Oliver is preparing Mia for this. He gives her a new suit, kind of like passing on the mantle of the Green Arrow. Barry's saying bye to Iris, like all that stuff's happening. Also, while they're doing that, Sarah and Brainy and Lois go on a mission to find Baby John there, the super baby, right? Who has apparently disappeared, and not just out of the multiverse. He went to the future of another Earth, which is Earth 16. Now, what's crazy about this is the year that he goes to is 2046, which was the year that the Legends went to Future Star City. But it turns out they didn't just travel to another timeline or to the future, they traveled to another Earth, which explains why the Arrow future timeline is so different than the timeline they saw, because it was a different Earth. Now, that was, I think, a smart decision, a smart explanation for that, and explains why, like, Oliver, we didn't see old Oliver in the future, why Connor Hawke wasn't the Green Arrow. It explained all that stuff. Now, it was weird, though, that the Wave Rider was actually able to cross not just dimensions, but, like, go to different Earths, because that wasn't really something that was established in Legends of Tomorrow. So I'm wondering that's going to play into future episodes, like into this new season of Legends that's coming up. But we'll see. So they have this big fight where everybody's teamed up, and they're taking down these shadow demons that look like Dementors from Harry Potter. I don't know what it is about the Arrowverse and shadow demons, or monsters that look like Dementors. It happened in The Flash, and now it's happening here. But anywho, they're all fighting. While all the fighting and preparing for Crisis is happening, the Supergirl crew is trying to help get people off the Earth, because they realize if we can't save the Earth, then we can save people, get them all to Earth 1. And they're using all alien ships because, of course, National City, Supergirl's Earth, filled with aliens, so of course they all came on ships. And they're assembling people. They get the help of Lena Luthor. What I thought was really great is that even though we've seen some weird stuff happen with her character this season, they did kind of stay true to her, where even though she has some beef with the Supergirl crew, she's still willing to put herself out there. She's still willing to help people, because that's still her ultimate goal. So, like, you do see some of her humanity still, even though she's not necessarily on the good guy side totally. Like, her intentions of what she's doing is good, but the way she's going about it is not how everybody else would agree to, you know what I mean? So she's helping them with that, and they're making a giant portal basically to send all these ships through and get them to Earth 1. All right, now back to the Quantum Tower. So they're all fighting, and then the Monitor shows up and says, hey, it's time to go. The fight is over. Let's save our energy for another day. He starts plucking them off one by one. Superman, Supergirl, Mia, Flash. Like, everybody gets taken away, and then Oliver's the last one standing. And Monitor's like, hey, dude, we gotta go. And Oliver's like, is everybody gone yet? And the Monitor is like, nope. And Arrow's like, well, it's not time. And he uses this special arrow to stop the Monitor. Like, it kind of stuns him, and he can't use his powers to, like, make Oliver go back to wherever he wants to go, right? Or for him to take Oliver out of the battle. And at first, it seemed kind of out of nowhere, but in Arrow, the recent season, they did have a storyline of Curtis building some kind of technology to go against the Monitor. Now, we didn't see them actually succeed necessarily. Like, we saw the mission of them getting the pieces for it, but I don't think we actually saw them build anything. So you could assume that this is a result of that storyline. And so at first it may seem like it came out of nowhere, but I guess they did kind of build to it, but I don't think it totally worked. They should have maybe done a scene where we see Curtis give Oliver this secret arrow that he can use on the monitor in case something goes wrong. But anywho, the monitor has to disappear. He doesn't make it out in time, and Oliver stays back to help as many people as he can. He fights off the the shadow demons, and he runs out of arrows. And that scene was like, oh no. At first, I was like, is this it? Is this how he dies? You see him run in. He charges into this army of shadow demons. The earth is exploding, and then they cut to commercial, which was terrible. I feel like they should not have done that. They should have just gone straight into the next scene. But we get back from the commercial break, and everybody makes it back to Arrow's base. But Arrow, the Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, is teleported onto a bed. We see he's like really beat up. He's bleeding really bad. And the monitor says he fought to his last breath. His effort, his sacrifice let us save an extra 1 billion people, which is crazy. And there we see Oliver die. Everybody's sad. And then Pariah shows up, a.k.a. Nash Wells. And Barry's like, Nash? And he's like, nope, I'm Pariah. And I released the anti-monitor. You see that now he's basically forced to see everybody, or see all these tragedies happen as a result of what he did. And you see Oliver die. And I was really shook by that they killed him off so early in this crossover. And I mean, it kind of makes sense though, because they were building up to this moment. At first, when I watched this crossover 2 times, right? Or at least part 1 through 3. And watching it the first time, I was not happy that they killed him off so early, but then knowing what I know that comes after, and then watching it all again, I did think it was actually done kind of well, in that he sacrificed himself saving people. He went out like a boss. I mean, he saved 1 billion people. He didn't have any arrows left. He basically tried to fight these shadow demons like with his bare fist. And he managed to pass on the torch and stuff. And so I do think they did a good job building up. And I think part 1 was one of the stronger parts of this crossover. And I was really excited to see where it went after that. Because at first with Oliver dying and then they started talking about him bringing him back, I was a little nervous, but it does go in interesting directions. So that's part 1. Now, part 2 is a little iffy for me. Again, when I watch it the second time, I did enjoy some things a little bit more, but for me, it was a little rocky. So let's get into that. This one starts out with Lila recruiting the legends from Another Earth, because our legends, Earth 1 legends, have been told they have no more crossovers. And so they're not going to be in this one, which I'll get into later. But Lila recruits the new legends, or I guess the Earth 74 legends, and they're Mick Rory. And apparently, he says one of them died and the rest of them just left or like retired. So it's just him left. And their version of Gideon is actually Leonard Snart, which I thought was a nice touch. While they're in this new Wave Rider, the monitor is telling them about the Paragons, which are the 7 people that can help save the multiverse. And then while they're talking about this, Lois and Clark's baby is crying, and they keep passing him along. They try to hand him to Batwoman, and she's like, nah. And then they pass him to Mick, and then he's perfectly fine, and Mick walks off with the baby. I thought that was a funny scene, and the first couple cries were funnier, but I feel like when it kept going, I was like, all right, let's move on. And so he tells them about Paragons, and that apparently they already knew some of the Paragons, that Sarah Lance is the Paragon of Destiny, that Kara is the Paragon of Hope, and then he gives them a clue for 2 of the other Paragons, the Bat of the Future, and a man who's last son of Krypton, I think, who's like suffered a loss greater than any person can bear, something like that. And so they split up and go on separate missions. One group is trying to revive Oliver using the Lazarus Pit, which again made me nervous. And then the other 2 groups are looking for Paragons. Now, one thing that they didn't know and that Kara didn't know is that the Monitor had revived Lex Luthor to help in the crisis. And of course, she was really mad about that. And she made a good point that, hey, why would you resurrect this guy but not Oliver Queen? And then the Monitor explains that as the Anti-Monitor grows stronger, I grow weaker. And I'm like, all right, I can buy that. But I could understand why Kara would be mad about that. And she's like, I don't trust this. I don't trust you. And so she is kind of iffy about the Monitor now. They now also have the Book of Destiny in the ship, which the Monitor went back in time to get. And this was from the last crossover, Elseworlds. And he uses that to try and help with the Paragon search. But there are certain people that want to use it for their own ulterior motives. Like Kara was thinking about using the book to bring back her Earth, while Lex Luthor gets away with the book and tries to use it to go on this Superman killing spree, which I thought was probably the best part of this episode, is the group trying to chase after Lex Luthor and stopping him from killing off all of the Superman, because one of the Paragons is a Superman, not the Superman we know, but a Superman on another Earth, who turns out to be Brandon Ross Superman, which is the Superman from Superman Returns. What we see is that his family and friends, all the people he knew, including Lois Lane, Perry White, Jimmy Olsen, they all got killed in this gas attack by some villain. He is the Paragon of Truth because he's suffered a great loss. And it leads to this big fight scene between the Earth 1 Superman and this new Superman. There's also a scene before that where we meet the Smallville Clark Kent, played by Tom Welling, reprising his role. And this scene, at first, I thought was gonna be something a little more meaningful. Like, I didn't watch a lot of Smallville, but I think I've seen enough of it to really get the gist of it, right? And at first, I was excited that maybe he'd finally suit up, or they'd have some other cool tie-in to it, but it turns out that he's given up his powers. He doesn't fight as Superman anymore, and he just has a family. So when Lex Luthor shows up to try and kill him, who one, he doesn't recognize because it's not Mike Rosenbaum, but also he's like, what are you doing here? And then they explain the multiverse thing. Lex Luthor tries to use kryptonite on him and it doesn't work because he doesn't have his powers. And Lex Luthor's like, what? And it was funny, I'll admit, it was funny that Clark just looked at the kryptonite and then picked it up, threw it away. But Lex Luthor's like, what are you talking about? You gave up your powers. Like, you were a god. And he's like, yeah, but I found something better. And you see that he has kids. And then Lex Luthor tries to make a move on him and he punches him. I mean, that was great, but it was a little disappointing because the trailers made it seem like such a big thing that, oh, Tom Welling's gonna be in this, but it was really more just like I can't even call it a cameo because we knew it was gonna be there, but it just didn't turn out to be as meaningful to the overall Crisis story. So I was a little disappointed in that, but I mean, I'll admit it was kind of funny and it was kind of cute to see him back with Lois Lane from the original Smallville series. All right, moving on, there's this really great fight between the two Supermen because Lex Luthor uses the Book of Destiny to gain control of we'll call him Kingdom Come Superman, because that's the suit he's wearing. And they have this big fight. Iris and Lois use love, like they remind him of the people he lost and that he loved in order to break the spell, as it were. So while this is going on, Kara and Kate are going on a mission to find the Bat of the Future. Batman on another Earth, I forgot the number. And this Batman is played by Kevin Conroy, who has been voicing Batman for many, many years. So this was really great to see him in live action finally. And he's playing the Kingdom Come version of Batman, whose body just been beaten to hell. Like, he has to walk around in his robotic exoskeleton now because he has been living as Batman. Like, he basically gave up his identity as Bruce Wayne and just is full-time Batman. So they run into this version of him. They also run into another version of Luke Fox, who is Batwoman's friend, and he's more of like a cool guy instead of the nerd. And Kara finds him attractive, and Kay's like, that's gross. But that was an interesting moment. But what I think was really crazy about this part is that we learned that this Batman is like a killer. He does what he needs to or for what he sees as justice. And he just has lost faith in humanity. And he's like, well, maybe it's okay that the multiverse is about to blow up or whatever. I mean, maybe we don't deserve saving. It turns out also that he has killed other members or other superheroes, of the other villains in the Batman Rogues Gallery, including this Earth Superman. So once Kara and Kate realize that, they're like, oh yeah, this guy is not our Paragon. And they get into this big fight. Turns out Bruce Wayne has kryptonite and tries to use it on Supergirl. And it ultimately ends with Kara and Kate, well, mostly Kate, killing this version of Bruce Wayne. This was also a slight disappointment for me too, because again, they did all this buildup of Kevin Conroy being Batman. And again, it didn't really lead to much. And it turns out this whole thing, them meeting this crazy version of Bruce Wayne, was to make Kate the Paragon of Courage. And again, I'm like, well, what was the point of that? Because yes, it taught her to be courageous and stand up to people, even her cousin. But at the same time, I feel like there was definitely another way they could have done that to find that she was a Paragon of Courage. But anywho, they move on. They have now, I think, 4 or 5 Paragons at this point. Yeah, or no, I think it's 4. Yeah, they have 4 Paragons. Moving into the next part, also, the last big thing is that Lila has been having like weird visions and hearing weird voices ever since the Monitor revealed he had the Book of Destiny. And we see her tripping out most of the episode, and finally at the end, she gets teleported away from the Wave Rider, and we see her finally meet, as we finally meet, the Anti-Monitor himself, and he looks pretty cool. And we've seen images before this, but I think seeing him in live action, seeing him actually walking around and stuff, would still look pretty cool. So now we see that Lila is being somewhat manipulated by the Anti-Monitor, and this plays a big role into part 3. All right, Part 3 now, I think, was probably my second favorite part out of the 3 parts of this. I would say part 2 was my least favorite, but part 3 was pretty wild. We start off with the birds of prey, Earth getting disintegrated. Again, this is another show I didn't really watch that much. I was really shocked to see the commercials for it and stuff. I mean, I'm pretty young, I guess, but I never watched the show a lot. But again, it establishes that all these previous DC comic shows and some movies are connected to the Arrowverse, and they all just exist on different Earths, which is great, but they're gone, which is sad. And so we see them getting ready to gear up for the next mission. Oliver has been brought back from the dead, but it's just his body. They need to still get his soul, so they required the help of Constantine to help them go to Purgatory to get him back. And Team Flash now is returning to Earth 1 because they realize that the antimatter, or the antimatter, is actually coming from their Earth. Like, the source of the antimatter wave is somewhere under their Earth, which turns out to be where Nash Wells was digging up the tomb, which at first we thought was the Monitor, but it actually turned out to be Antimatter, and that's what released him and turned Nash Wells into Pariah. But Cisco, Killer Frost, and Barry go down to this layer to try and find out the source of the antimatter wave and to stop it. Pariah shows up because he only shows up when there's going to be a tragedy, which is a bad sign, and it turns out, if you remember, this is premiered on December 10th, 2019, which is the date that the Flash was supposed to disappear in the Crisis. So keep that in mind as we're going through this. They go into the chamber where the antimatter cannon is. They see this blur next to it on a treadmill, and it turns out to be the 90s Flash who was trapped there after Elseworlds. They do a little flashback to show that he was teleported there during that last fight scene where they were all confronting the Monitor. And when he was teleported there, he explains that he was taken to the Anti-Monitor, who then put him on this treadmill to control this giant cannon. And there's a lock, or like there's a mechanism in it where if the person on there stops running, then the cannon is like set to self-destruct and just destroy the rest of the remaining Earths in one go. So it's pretty high stakes. They also do a flashback to explain that when Earth 2 was destroyed, that was a test of the antimatter cannon. That explains why it happened so soon before Crisis. And so I loved how it tied everything together, and it really raised stakes because now someone has to get on that treadmill and stop the cannon. While this is happening, also Black Lightning shows up to help out of nowhere because Pariah feels bad and he goes to find him from his Earth before it disappears. Now what was interesting is that before Black Lightning showed up, we saw Lois watching a monitor, seeing all these Earths disappear. And we saw Earth 73 disappear, and then Black Lightning showed up. So I guess that means that he's on Earth 73. But the rest of his family is gone, and their mid-season finale, Black Lightning I'm talking about, their mid-season finale was really heavy on the antimatter stuff. You see Jennifer meeting her alternate versions and the Earth 1 Pierce family and another Earth, I forgot the other one was, but you see her meeting other versions of herself, and you see the red skies of the antimatter, and then at the end of the episode you see them all get wiped out, the whole family, and Jefferson is saved. But what I feel like is that, one, Lightning should have come with Black Lightning to Earth 1. I feel like the way they made it seem like her power was so affected by the antimatter that I feel like there would have been a reason for her to magically show up there. Like, she could have maybe helped with the Crisis somehow, but I guess that is just how it is. Maybe contracts or something, or they couldn't pay her to come in. I'm not sure. But Black Lightning shows up, kind of gets dropped in the middle of this. I feel like they also could have maybe given him a better introduction to the Arrowverse, but anywho, he shows up, tries to help them absorb the energy of the antimatter cannon before it explodes. And while they're doing that, the two Flashes, 90s Flash and our version of Barry Allen, go into Flash time to try and come up with a plan. And they decide, what if we run backwards and cause it to like implode on itself? But that means someone has to go in there. Barry assumes, well, this is my time to go. Well, our Barry, Earth 1 Barry, is like, well, I guess this is my time to go. And then they have this really sweet moment where he hugs Caitlin, who turns back into Caitlin from Killer Frost, and Cisco, who is now Vibe again. Also, let me go back. The Monitor gives Cisco his powers back, but like forcefully. Like, Cisco's like, nah, I don't want to do this. I gave up my powers for a reason. And the Monitor's like, yeah, you should accept your fate. You have a reason to be here. You have a purpose. And then like basically forces him back into being Vibe. Now, I was excited for Vibe coming back, but under these circumstances, I feel kind of bad for Cisco because he's just getting it forced upon him. And so Cisco is Vibe again. All right, fast forward back to the antimatter cannon. They are now saying goodbye to Barry because they think it's his time to go. But Barry Allen from Earth 90, the 90s, has a different plan. He absorbs Barry's speed, which we didn't know was possible, but now that's something apparently. And Cisco agrees to let him go back on the treadmill to sacrifice himself for the multiverse. And so we see that iconic Infinite Crisis moment where the Flash disappears, he disintegrates while he stops the Infinite Cannon. Everybody else escapes through a breach. And it is sad. Now, I did not grow up on the 90s Flash. He is not my Flash necessarily. So to me, this scene didn't hurt as much, but I know it hurt a lot of people. And so, I mean, like the emotion was there. It just didn't hurt me or didn't hit me as bad as I feel like it did for a lot of people. But also with this situation, I think it was a little bit of a cop-out because they had all this build up to the Flash disappearing, to our Barry disappearing, and then they, at the last minute, didn't do it because of a loophole. So I feel like in this case, it was a little bit wasted, the whole emotional build-up to him disappearing, because at least in the case of Oliver, for example, he did actually die. So it was worth all the build-up, the emotional build-up. I mean, it happened earlier than I was expecting, but it still happened. Whereas with Barry, it didn't happen. He still survived. So I'm kind of like, well, what was the point of all that? But we'll see when the Flash continues. So after the whole antimatter cannon fiasco with the disappearance or the death of 90s Flash, we're back on the ship. Now, while that whole thing was going on, Iris, Ray, and Ralph are looking for the last Paragon, the Paragon of Humanity, which is Ryan Choi, who in the comics, I believe, takes over as the Atom. And when they tell him about everything, they tell him that they're superheroes and that the multiverse is doomed. It's like dying. Ryan's first reaction is like, I have to go home and see my family, which I thought was a really interesting angle to it. Like, I don't want to step up and help the multiverse when I could be with my family. Like, if the Earth's gonna die, I'd rather be with my family. And I thought that was sweet. But I was kind of convincing them, like, yeah, we have to do things that we may not feel like we're ready for. Like, you have to help the multiverse, you have to help your family. And then she kind of talks about how her husband Barry has to sacrifice himself all the time, and he's not like them. He's a superhero, so he has this responsibility. So they do convince him basically to come with them. So now they're all back on the ship, and they have all the Paragons assembled. While they're there, Diggle came on the ship earlier in the episode. He was not happy that they didn't tell him about Oliver, but now he's also kind of angry that Lila's missing. All right, let's circle back to Oliver. So we see this whole thing about Constantine, Mia, and Diggle going after Oliver's soul. And they get the help of Constantine and the help of Lucifer from the Fox show, now Netflix show. And that guy, I forgot the name of the actor, but he lied on social media and said he was not going to be in this crossover. So he really got everybody fooled. So kudos to him for being a great actor, of course, because he basically lied to the whole world and then surprise showed up on Earth 666, where he gives them a special card that lets them go to purgatory, but this card has a painting on it, and once the painting disappears, then they're trapped in purgatory. So they're on a time limit. They go to purgatory, which is Lian Yu for Oliver, because that's what he considers his personal hell, I guess. And while they're there, they find Oliver. They have to give him his memories back, basically. But then while they're about to leave with him, he decides to stay because this guy shows up and says, hey, I'm a Spectre. You have a bigger calling. If you leave now, all the people you love are going to die, blah, blah, blah. So Oliver doesn't come back, which I was kind of happy about because his death would have been a waste if he just magically came back from the Lazarus pit, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It's, again, the Flash, the buildup to me was not worth it, but in the case of Arrow, I think it was worth it because he did actually die and he did not come back, even though they tried to bring him back. So I thought that was good. All right, now fast forward back to the ship. Everybody's wondering where Lila is, and she magically shows up again, but also Pariah shows up. And everybody's kind of putting two and two together, like, hey, wait, Pariah's here, and Lila is here. So if she's being manipulated by Antimatter, he wanted her here, but also since Pariah is here, that means he's here to see a tragedy. He's here to see something bad happen. And then it's revealed that Lila is being possessed by the Anti-Monitor. She starts causing havoc on the ship. She fights the Monitor head on, and he gets destroyed, he gets killed. After she defeats the Monitor, she then destroys Earth 1 because now Earth 1 was the last remaining Earth. And now the multiverse is gone and everybody in the ship are the last people in the multiverse. And Pariah sees all this happening and says, you know what? I've done all this wrong. I messed up by releasing you in the first place, but you know what I can do? I can send these people away. So he sends the Paragons away and the remaining heroes are there. The Paragons are sent to the vanishing point while the Anti-Monitor destroys the ship and kills off everybody. So now 7 Paragons are the only people left in the multiverse. But there's a twist. It turns out that Lex Luthor was posing as the Kingdom Come Superman, Earth 96 Superman, and you see him transform back into Lex Luthor, and everybody's like, what is going on? And it turns out that Well, this is how I interpret it. I interpret it as Lex Luthor taking the place of Earth 96 Superman as the Paragon of Truth. But everybody else was saying that he just kind of replaced him, but didn't actually become a Paragon, that he actually just took Superman's place, and now there's only 6 Paragons. But as I interpret it, Lex Luthor rewrote Destiny using the Book of Destiny and made himself a Paragon. So now they're the last 7 people remaining on the multiverse, and they're at the vanishing point, which is from Legends of Tomorrow, which is the point where time and space, or it's a point outside of time and space where the Anti-Monitor can't get to them. So now they're the last people standing between the Anti-Monitor and completely recreating the universe in his image, or the multiverse in his image. So, all that being said, at first I was kind of iffy about this crossover. I think in scale it was technically bigger than previous crossovers, but to me, Crisis on Earth X felt a lot more grand and crazy because, one, I feel like there's a lot more heroes involved. This one, even though it's Crisis on Infinite Earths, it should be a really big event where everybody's involved. There's actually not that many people involved when you think about it. I mean, they're talking about other Earths here, talking about different versions of different characters, and we see glimpses of them, but the real focus are like this really small group of people because not all of Supergirl's people are there. The Legends aren't there, really. It's just Sarah Ray and the other version of Mick Rory, not even the version that we know, really. I mean, he's pretty similar anyway. But that part's kind of disappointing. Now, there are some really great fights here, the really great action, a lot of great tension, and some really emotional moments. So overall, I think, if I had to think about, like, part 1 and part 3 were really good, and then part 2 was kind of eh. But overall, I think I have enjoyed it so far. Now, I am excited to see where it ends and what this means for the rest of the Flash season, the rest of Arrow, which will only have 2 more episodes after this, and then Legends of Tomorrow, which is basically starting their season right after Crisis ends. This is going to be crazy. Overall, I think I'm enjoying it. It's just, I feel like they could have done more. I feel like more people could have been involved. I feel like The Flash could have had a more tragic ending. I think they could have done something with Barry Allen. Maybe they will do it. I mean, it's still early. It's still 2 more parts left. It's a 5-part crossover. But as of right now, I feel like they kind of copped out of doing something crazy with The Flash, which I feel like they've done already with season 3 when he disappeared into the Speed Force. I think they need to do something big. And I feel like if Wally was still there, Wally West, who I wish was in the crossover, by the way, if he was still there, they would have done something more meaningful with The Flash and maybe would have killed him off, or he would have disappeared for a few episodes or maybe half a season, something crazy like that. But it is what it is. I mean, I love Grant Gustin, love Barry Allen. I just feel like for there to be a real emotional impact, something should have happened to him in this crisis, because I feel like besides losing his Earth, obviously, and losing Iris and everybody he loves, okay, that's a lot. But in terms of what will happen in the future, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure they're going to bring back all the multiverse. I don't think they're going to be gone. It's like Infinity War where everybody disappeared and they brought them back in Endgame. I feel like it's going to be like that for this crossover. I don't think they're all permanently gone. I don't think Black Lightning's Earth is permanently gone because, again, he wouldn't have a show if they're all gone and it'd be kind of a waste. So I think they're going to bring them back at some point. And so, I think this was all right. I feel like, for me, I'm leaning more towards Crisis on Earth X as my favorite as of right now, but I feel like the next 2 parts could change that. I mean, there's some really crazy parts in this one, but overall, I'm still kind of eh. But I do love the callbacks to previous episodes. I love the callbacks to previous series. Is that even a word? Previous shows in the multiverse in DC Comics. I thought those are great. Now, not all of the cameos worked for me, but I do think it was nice seeing a lot of these people come back or come to a role that they've been playing for a long time, but maybe in a different way, like Kevin Conroy, for example, who was a voice actor but then became the live-action Batman, or Brandon Routh returning to Superman, who he played way back in the early 2000s. I think things like that were cool, but overall, this crossover was enjoyable, but there were some parts that didn't work. All that being said, what did you think of Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1 through 3? Let me know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to like the video, share it, and subscribe. I will probably do a similar video like this when parts 4 and 5 come out, one video. And otherwise, I'll be taking a break from doing the shows. I'm just going to be focusing on movies and some other projects. So look forward to those. All right, see you in the next one.